This is Gaylon McDowell, and this is the Meta Behind Relationships. I'm here to talk to you today about spiritual parenting because I'm a big believer that just because you understand these spiritual principles doesn't mean that those that are closest to you, especially your children, understand what it means to look at life from a spiritual perspective. So, as parents, we've been gifted with the responsibility of making sure that we gift our children with the tools they need to be effective people in the world. So, to have this conversation around spiritual parenting, I'm bringing on the CEO and founder of the 5S for Love platform, Christine Burkett. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Gaylon, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing outstanding. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. You know me, if it's something that I don't know and I don't know this, I'm
Right.
excited because I'm getting ready to learn something. So I think this will be great. And which lends to like my very first question is I had no idea there was a concept or idea behind spiritual parenting, right?
Hmm.
So I need to find out what am I doing as a parent and what should I be doing as a parent to make sure. Because I think people, as people do realize, even though your child is an adult, you're still parenting, right?
Hmm.
And you need to make sure that you're on point because they're going to continue to grow as an adult and you want to make sure you're giving them the best advice or recommendations or giving them the best examples as they move forward. So I'm ready to go. I need to know, what is spiritual parenting?
All right. So, spiritual parenting is parenting that focuses on raising children to know that they are more than physical bodies and personalities, and
Okay.
focuses on spiritual development, morality, integrity, understanding, and compassion. In other words, if children just think that they are what they see in the mirror, and many times the voices that's going on in their heads are own thoughts and emotional reactions, then they
Right.
won't have the baseline needed to understand that they're more than that. That, from my perspective at least, a spiritual being living in a spiritual universe governed by spiritual law. So, like most human beings, we're connected to the five senses. What the five senses tell us, and you in your scientific background really know
Mhm.
this, that works up to a certain point because
Point.
even scientists will tell you that when you look at life from the quantum physics level, that the particle is a particle. When you look at it one way, the same person looks at it from a different angle. Now it's a wave, and they've
Right.
discovered that consciousness affects life, the fundamental elements of life, based upon the perceiver. Why is that important? It's to help them understand that, okay, life is more than the five senses. Life is also your intuition. Life is also your inspiration. Life is also your dreams. Life is a lot of stuff. And if you just get caught up in your small little world and what that looks like, you can miss out on a lot of stuff. Beyond also, like I said before, teaching them about integrity, morality, ethics,
Right.
honesty, treating people right with kindness and compassion and
Mm.
cooperation. These are things that are necessary because it's really easy to get caught up in the ego, allow your mind to totally get wrapped up into your small world and turn into an exceptionally selfish being. And if we're going to be honest, children in particular tend to be exceptionally selfish. If we're honest, see, people don't want to admit this.
Here they are.
Children want it to be about them. They want the attention.
Yes.
And they'll seek that attention through positive means and negative means.
Yes.
They still want the attention.
You're right. And I think, just given the overall perspective, looking at my life and how my parents raised me, you're correct. I think it was more so of a spiritual approach than just raising me as an individual. And I think that's one of the benefits to growing up in a Unitarian, I call it Unitarian church background, because in unity, they teach that. So it's
Mhm.
kind of like, and I think maybe that's a space that I really didn't focus on raising my son. And I'm really looking at, I mean, he'll be 21 this year. So it's not like I don't have time. I do have time. But when you think about all five senses, I do take those moments to just take in everything that's going on around me and not just what I'm hearing, to experience those things and to kind of play out how does that impact my day. And I found that I find peace just in listening. And this is going to sound crazy, listening to the sun. When the sun is at its radiant, his highest point, there's a vibrational energy that I feel when I'm just sitting there and I'm embracing it. And it sounds very weird, I think, to some people, but it's very calming for me. And I think that's why I spend so much time working in the yard in the summer, because that to me is just embracing that moment, and it's a calmness. It calms me. Is that weird?
No, actually, my kung fu teacher actually, he doesn't live in the same area now anymore. He still gets up, but he used to live in the right off of Lakeshore, right off of Lake Michigan. He
Hmm.
literally like 2 blocks from Lake Michigan. So he would get up on the weekends, walk to the lake, or he was by the Museum of Science and Industry for those who know Chicago. Or he would go behind the museum. They used to have a Japanese garden. They're turning
Hmm.
it into the Barack Obama presidential everything now and golf, but it was a Japanese garden back behind there. And he would
Right.
sit at night. He would put incense down, and then he would meditate for like 4 hours while the
Wow.
sun, because he wanted to be in around life energy, the plants,
Right.
trees, the flowers, while the sun was rising. He called it his while he was doing his qigong meditative breathing. So no, it's not strange to me. I hang around strange people.
Well, folks, we're gonna go to a quick
Strange is
commercial
good.
break. And look, Mike, like yourself included, and I might need to get into some kung fu or some. I might need to do more of that. But folks, when we get right, we're gonna go to a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. We're gonna talk about how to teach your children about spirituality. So I think this is something. If you're not aware of it, you need to grab a pen and paper, because you need to really focus on what you need to be doing as a parent. Is different than just raising your child to be respectful, right, intelligent. Is more than that. And I think as parents, we need to give our kids the best foot forward possible. So spirituality is a key point. Folks, we'll be right back after this quick commercial break. My name is Christine Burkett, the inventor of the 5 F's to Love. This is a compatibility app. It's an app that gives you an opportunity to rate words that start with the letter F in chronological order of importance to you, to help you find your one true love, your soulmate, and the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. So after you've taken the time to rate your F's in chronological order, you send a link to the person, I don't know, you just met, or the person you've been dating for quite some time. Or maybe it's the person you've been married to for 30 to 40 to 50 years. And then you compare your top 5 F's to find out what things you have in common and things that you may perhaps need to work on. This is taking a simplistic perspective on how to find your one true love, your soulmate, the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. And thank you for downloading the 5F's app. Hey guys, welcome back. When we left off, we were just getting the definition of what spiritual parenting is. And Galen, I'm going to tell you, I'm just like right now in this moment, it's just like a calmness us having this conversation, but I'm definitely going to rewatch this again, because the more time I spend with Julian, I want to make sure that I'm still giving him that parenting support and advice and recommendations that's going to lead him down the right path. So the question I have for you is, how do you teach your children about spirituality in the different stages of adolescence?
I think that first of all, you have to have your own spiritual development, your own spiritual awareness, because you can't give what you don't have. So I think that's the first thing. So the first thing is making sure that you are doing your own spiritual work, that you are consciously and intentionally seeking to grow spiritually. That's the first thing. Then you find age appropriate information and talk to them in ways that they can understand. For example, uh, what I did with my daughter, Angel, uh, besides the fact that at a very early age, before she even realizes, I was just praying over her. That by itself, okay. I did when she was in her mother's womb. From the day I found out her mother was pregnant, I would every morning and evening I would put my hand on her abdomen, and I would pray for beauty, intelligence, and health. That was I had a whole prayer. I can't. It was crazy is I remember everything, and I can't remember that prayer to this day. I try to, and I prayed it every day for almost 8 months. Once we found out that that my ex-wife was pregnant, and then after that, pray over them and consistently do that, even as they get older. Pray for them. Pray not pray for them in the sense that they're not doing their prayer, but sometimes you just gotta stand in the gap in consciousness. That's part of the responsibility. But again, finding age appropriate information. So one of the first things that I did was I went and I saw a print book. Now you might be able to find it online. It was a book called Daily Word for Families. It was a 365 lessons, and it was basically for families. So I would just read it to my daughter. I would when she went to bed, and then at the end of it had an affirmation. So initially she couldn't say it, so I would say, repeat after me, and she would say the affirmation. She doesn't remember any of this, so let me just be clear. But it's in that subconscious, and then as she got older, I would have her read the affirmation. So she was participating. The other thing was, and I'll talk about this more later. As soon as she could talk, we would not leave the garage in the morning without me having her repeat with me the prayer for protection. You're muted, Christine. So I don't know if you were trying to talk or not.
No, I was thinking, wow, really the prayer of protection. And that's beautiful.
The abridged version, not the super long version, but the
Right.
light of God surrounds me, the love of God.
Right.
Well, I would do it for the group. The light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. That's for the group instead of for the singular. But she got used to it to the point to where in the midst of busyness, sometimes I would pull out, get in my car and pull out. And she's like, Daddy, you didn't say the prayer for protection. So she got used to that as a process. Okay. Something as simple as, okay, it's time to eat. We say grace. Even now, I joke with her now because she's 23. And for some of you all who watched other shows, she's been on the Real Talk with Ladies for the last couple of weeks. If she sits down and eats in front of me and she doesn't say grace first, I was like, stop acting like a heathen. And I will say it just like that. And she knows that I'm not calling her a heathen, but that's my way of acting like a heathen. Act like you were raised by somebody. And my point is, give thanks when you eat. It's little subtle things like that. So then, as she got older, she was a part of the Christ Universal Temple Children's Church. She was around people. She was, learning different things. And then you have conversation. What you learned at children's ministry today? And you have a conversation about it. As she got older, it was things I had her read. When she was a little kid, I had her read Rich Dad, Poor Dad for children, young people, or whatever it was. And then it was Rich Dad, Poor Dad for teens. I had her doing, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens and 6 Most Important Decisions and all different type of books. Matter of fact, I think I sent you some information about some books, and I hope I got all the authors right, because some of that stuff is just the authors and the books are all mixed up in my brain now. She probably read cover to cover because I just made her do it. I ain't gonna lie to you. The Simple Truth by Richard and Mary Alice Jaffola, probably 6 times, easily.
Now, so Gaylon, when you think about it, though, if there's other people who are not spiritually led, how would you direct them to expose their child to spirituality? Because everyone is not spiritual. And I say that they may be religious, but they may not be spiritual. That's 2 different things, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is, first of all, let me deal with the argument that you just gave, because I think that's a common term now. And I get why people say it. What I will say is that most people who are spiritual develop that spirituality through some religious path. Very few people are just walking down and all of a sudden they're walking down the street and all of a sudden, aha moment. Normally they receive some level of spiritual awakening either through some religious movement or a self-help spiritual author who was originally a part of some movement who was awakened and maybe moved beyond it. But if you trace it back more than 2 to 3 steps, it's normally connected to some religion. So let me just leave that even books like Think and Grow Rich and The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill are just metaphysics and new thought repackaged. Now, if you got a parent who's not very religious slash spiritual, what do? Well, as a parent, that's why I said you have what it boils down to is what do you want to leave your kids as a legacy? And I think part of the legacy is, first of all, is modeling what you want them to see. Many times people don't want to model what they want to see. You know, when we were growing up, our parents told us, do as I say, not as I do. And you're muted. So just be mindful that that doesn't work. It never worked. The only reason why
Correct.
it seemingly worked back in the day was because people had no problem beating the daylights out of their children
Other
to make them
kids.
act right.
Yep.
Okay. But as soon as they got out of the sight of their parents, they did what they saw because culture and environment have a
Right.
lot to do with how a person behaves as they age and grow forth because the mind is seeing all of this
Mm-hmm.
and that's creating the norm.
Right.
So what I would say is, what do you want your child or children to know? What do you want your children to do? What type of environment do you want them to understand to be normal? For me and my child, and I can only speak for that, and she has a right as a young woman to make her own decisions now, but as a
Mm-hmm.
parent, I felt as though it was my responsibility to set the pace of the norm with me and her mother. I don't want to like I'm taking full credit for who she is or who she isn't. Um, to create an environment that became a norm. Because when chaos and drama and craziness, or as what I'm about to say might upset some people, but I shoot from the hip, or creating environments where the only time you see adults having fun and
Right.
laughing and giggling and joking is when they're drunk and high.
Right.
uh, Creates an environment to where you know uh, you when you have children around this, you think that's adulthood. So you're 5, 6 years old, and
Right.
everything turns into crazy party with the adults of your life.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get old enough to be that in the midst of that, and part of being in the midst of that is taking on all the things you see, whether it's good,
Right.
bad, or indifferent. So
Right.
I'm not anti-alcohol. I don't do anything. I'm
Right.
the strongest thing I'll drink is Hawaiian punch. I don't even drink coffee. Uh, so my point is, the environment you set
Mm-hmm.
for your child will trump everything. Culture trumps strategy. If you have a great strategy and a poor culture, the culture will win. I don't care if it's your home. I don't care if it's your work. I don't care if it's your church. I don't care if it's your government. I don't care if it's your marriage. If you have a poor culture and a great strategy, the culture will win because you're not tackling the great unseen. Culture is unseen,
Right.
unspoken, and unheard, yet everybody understands it.
You know what? That's huge, what you just said. Culture versus spirituality. That's got to be a duel for some parents because it's really hard to manage that what kids are seeing versus what the kid is experiencing and seeing. So those are two different things. And so I think sometimes we miss that step because we're not really focusing on, it's my kid going to mimic this, right? And that's a lot. That's what happens. Like I know for me, I mimic a lot of what my mother did because I saw her doing things a certain way. So it's a natural given that I manage things the way she does because it just seemed like that was the right thing to do. So you're right. If I had mimicked her doing these other things, then I would have been, you know what I mean? I wasn't exposed to drinking because my parents didn't drink. So
Yeah.
it's a different situation. So you're
Right.
right. So, folks, when we get back, Galen's going to go in deep on that, culture versus spirituality. So, you guys have a better understanding of what that looks like if you're not a spiritual parent. Okay, that's what's important. We want to understand the difference between the two and how you can start just kind of tweaking what it is that you're showing your kid, what you're surrounding them with. And it's not that you have to be spiritual, but you have to be intentional, is what he's saying. You just have to be intentional. Okay, so we'll be right back after this quick commercial break.
여유롭게 달려와 내일은 더 빛나지 당연 yeah. 내 삶은 shine like a diamond 괜히 해서 뭐해 걱정 I got no worries no I got no worries no I got no worries no I'm shining like a diamond yeah. Got different view 여유롭게 teasing yeah. 내 자유로운 soul leave me be please 문제가 돈이 나면 I'll be filthy rich But 걱정 따윈 없지 나는 rich 내밀어 따위는 너
What's up with it? Do it cause I love it and I stuck with it. We ain't with the subbing in the cut with it. Please none of the talks, I heard enough of it. Like, what you gonna do? Where you at? Who you with? You ain't really about this, don't talk about it. Really on the move, on the map, never slip. Keep your hands to your lips, don't talk about it. Real eyes, real lies all the time. Stand on it, if we said it, we don't walk around it. Loose lips, ain't shifts, red cup, blue strips, new phone, who this? No, we don't allow it. Really on go, I don't know what's an off day. Now we on road, came from smoking in the hallway. Now we got shows, boys feeling like Broadway. Always look both ways, even on a crossway. Driving down Cross Bay, out town Barclays. Really on big things, came up a small way. Championship rings, baby, that's a ball game. Oh, she want a little bag, baby, that's small change. Yeah, that money talk. If we ain't cool, then cut me off. No breaking news, don't run your mouth. Thought it was the plug, now he running off. Thought it was a plug, now he running off. What you gonna do? Where you at?
Hey guys, welcome back to the 5F's to Love podcast network. Of course, you guys know it is Gaylon, right? It's Wednesday. What are you guys expecting? So listen, our conversation, if you're just joining us, is about spiritual parenting, but we do understand every parent is not religious or spiritual, right? But there are certain things that you can mimic. And if you didn't catch our last episode where he talked about if you're a parent who's doing a lot of drinking and partying and your kid think that's what it's about when you become an adult, 9 times out of 10, they're going to mimic that, right? So Galen, if you become conscious and aware of this, your kid is now 10 and you've been mimicking this certain type of behavior around them. What are some suggestions that you would make to a parent who may not be a spiritual or religious parent, but who's just living life, right? We got a lot of young parents out here.
Well, yet again, it goes back to the conversation of what do you want your child to do, and how do I model and create the environment to promote it? Whether a person feels as though they want to be a religious person, go to a religious institution, a church, a mosque, a synagogue, etc., a temple, versus a person who just wants to live their life and do their own thing.
Right.
If they're listening to this show, I do hope that they at least are seekers, trying to figure out, okay, what's a better way to do some things that promote my authentic spiritual nature, even if I don't want to be a person who wants to wrap my life around a religious belief per se. What I would say again is everything is when it comes to children is the culture you create. And I don't want to get away from that answer, because the culture you create is not just in your home. The culture you create is what is allowed around your children. You can be in a situation, a circumstance, for instance, where let me use an example. I'm not saying this is my example. Okay, for instance, you got family, and one side is really wild, and another side is, you might have some outliers where they are looking at life differently. And you have to decide how much you want to expose your children, even to your loved ones.
Right.
And if they do see things, and you explain to them why you disagree with that behavior and the consequences of that behavior. Those are things that are important. People don't want to deal with culture. And the reason why I say people don't want to deal with culture is because it's the great unseen, it's the great unsaid, it's the great unnoticed.
Mm-hmm.
It's people think culture is the way things are.
Mm-hmm.
You go to a job, everybody does it. Think about when you hear children when they mess up. Well, mom, they were doing it. All the kids are doing it. Culture. Okay. So if you don't give an alternative culture that you're promoting, if you don't give an alternative culture to what the world is promoting, the streets are promoting, TV is promoting, social media is promoting, then you're going to lose, because strategy does not beat culture.
Wow.
I really want you to get this. It's like let me put it this way. I used to say it this way. I didn't make it up this way, but this was said well before Donald Trump was the president. But I heard it written this way. I read it this way years ago. Culture trumps strategy.
Wow.
Okay. Culture trumps strategy. Think about it. You've been in the business world your whole adult life.
Yeah.
How many times have you seen people try to interject strategy into a work environment without dealing with the culture?
Exactly. It doesn't happen.
Right. So what ends up happening is the people who create successful change and transformation in organizations, they do a few things. They evaluate who's in the culture.
Mm-hmm.
They evaluate who are the real players that create the culture that they're dealing with.
Right.
And at all costs, they seek to eliminate them from the culture. Because if you come, John Maxwell tells a wonderful story, and I love it. He said, for those who are familiar, he's a leadership expert out of Atlanta. He used to be a pastor. And this goes right along with children and spiritual parenting. I know I'm looking at the thing that says partnering, so I think I don't know if that could be edited later, but the John Maxwell said when he first got his first church in a rural area of Indiana, I believe, he wanted to do all of these changes and growth, and he's meeting with his board and whatever, and he notices he was giving all of these great ideas, and he's a big thinker. Everybody was really looking to this one board member, a board member that wasn't the president of the board, for his nod.
And then everyone else fell in line.
Right. So what John Maxwell realized he needed to do, if he was going to have any success in moving that church and growing it, was he drove out to the man's farm, sat down with him, and enrolled him into his vision.
Wow.
Now when the meetings happen, he's given the nod.
Exactly.
The rest of the people in the room
fell in line.
Right. Because what John Maxwell understood was, if he didn't address the issue of the culture, which was unsaid, nobody was going to say, this guy's the real leader.
Right.
We all follow him because he's the strong personality.
Right.
He dictates the pace. She determines what we do.
Right.
If you don't understand that, then you really are not getting and understanding how effective change happens.
Right.
So you might say, okay, well, I've been raising my kid a particular way for a certain amount of time. You're gonna have to flip it now, because you've been raising your kid a certain way for a certain time. They're gonna test you to see if you really are the new you.
Right.
Okay. They're gonna test it. Children test. It's their nature test. They're gonna test to see if you have to be able to hold the line on who the real and new you is, not only in what you do, but what you say, even when you don't think they're listening, because they are.
All the time.
Okay, even if it's second and third person.
Right.
Yeah, I saw your mama over Auntie Liz's house, and she was turning it up. But then you come home, and she wants to be the prude.
Right.
Right. Get my point. Is can I consistently show up as the person I want my child to model? I'm not saying that your child should dictate everything that you do in your life.
Right.
I'm not saying that. What I am saying is, if you're not intentional, if you're not dealing and creating the culture and modeling what you want to see, then you're gambling. And here's what I understand about gambling, because I'm not a gambler, but I have some family members who are dedicated gamblers.
Are they?
Yeah, dedicated. Like I'm not gonna say online how dedicated they are to gambling.
They dedicated.
Yeah, some legal gambling, some other things.
Gaylon said they dedicated though.
Dedicated gamblers. But this is what I understand about gambling, because I've seen it. The house always wins.
Oh, yes.
So if you are gambling with what your child may and may not be exposed to, their culture, and what they're learning and not learning, then you're gambling with the consciousness, the soul growth, and the mental and emotional development of your children.
So how do you, when you think about that big picture, how do you then address extremely difficult issues with your child?
First of all, I think that everything is, first of all, age appropriate. So let me just be clear, because I think age appropriate conversations matter. So this is, again, I'm not putting myself up as the guru of this, do everything Gaylon said. What I'm trying to do is share ideas that you can use. And as my teacher used to say, the Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman, take what I give you and put it with what God gave you. That's my position.
I like that.
Yeah, she was, I've told you before many times, if you would have met Reverend Coleman, you would have loved her. You probably would have helped her build 3 other churches with your ambition. But anyway, what I would say to that is, the first thing you do when you give a child tough news, difficult news, is the first thing you have to give them is your emotional stability.
Okay.
What do I mean by that? When my mother was ill, my mother got ill in 2009. I ended up having to move her into my home in 2010. And I was taking care of her, soup to nuts, doctor's appointments, giving her shots and stuff in the morning and the evening and the whole nine. And, she ended up passing away before the end of 2010 without getting into all of those details. Angel is 11, maybe. And she had never had any significant deaths in her family that she remembered. No, like this was the first one. So obviously when that situation went down, I had to have a conversation with her based upon my emotional stability.
Right.
Okay. Because this is what I understood as a father. My breakdown is her breakdown.
Right.
All right. And that doesn't mean, I got to hide my emotions. No, it was spiritual maturity. Because I think some people think, well, you're just doing spiritual bypass. That seems to be a term these days that people are using. And I do think that spiritual bypass is a real thing, but people don't have sometimes the discernment to understand the difference between spiritual maturity and bypass. I had to understand that I was literally teaching her how to handle it.
Right.
Okay, that's one. 2, if my emotions were all over the place because she loves me so much, her emotions were going to be all over the place. So modeling what I wanted to see, I was mindful as I mourned, as I dealt with the grief of my mother not being there. I was also very mindful of this is a teaching moment. Now, I'm not saying everybody's me. I'm, like I said, I'm weird and I hang around weird people. Okay.
Probably is one of them.
Okay. And I'm okay with being weird because
exactly.
Okay. but I was mindful that this is a teaching moment, not just for me,
Right.
but for others. So when it came time to have that conversation and other difficult conversations I've had with her about other family people or situations, or when she was 8 years old, 7, 8 years old, when me and her mother end up having to have a divorce, sit down and talk to her. Like, okay,
Right.
explaining nothing changes between me and you. I'm your dad. I'm always going to be here. Da da da. What does this mean? What does it look like? And really having that difficult conversation at an age appropriate level, because what I had to give her was my stability, and her mother had to do the same. Again, I'm not going to take full credit for that. I'm just
Right.
talking about it from my perspective.
Right.
I had to give her my stability, because if I'd have been all over the place and hugging her and oh my God and all that whining and crying and emotional eruptions, I would have given her my emotional instability. Now she's on
Yeah.
her toes because she don't know what to expect next.
Right.
The best thing a parent can ever give a child is stability.
I don't think parents understand that.
Right. Stability in the context of the love. Because if you
Mhm.
have love and no stability, the child
Yep.
will love you, but
Ooh,
they're tense because they don't know
all the
what
time.
next to expect.
Exactly.
And let me be clear, because my parents divorced when I was 1, and I normally don't talk about this type of stuff, but I think it's important. I lived that life.
Right.
I went, because my parents divorced so early, I moved they would keep me 1 year at a time until I was 7. I never
Wow.
lived in the same place more than a year. Never had the same room because they were always moving. So I moved.
Right.
When I went to with the other parent, when I came back, they were living somewhere else.
Right.
Sometimes with somebody else.
Right.
so it was a situation and circumstance where until I was probably 8 years old, I had no real security and stability far as this is home, this is
Right.
where I am. Things are not going to change. I don't have to go to a new school. It was so much stuff going on. So I understand stability and security from a different perspective, not because I read it out of a book.
Right.
I know what it means also for your parents not to get along.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I know what that means. I know
That's
what
a
that
real
means.
thing.
Okay. So for me, those lessons became things that I wanted to make sure that I fixed in my branch of the tree of the McDowell line.
I like that.
Okay. Like, okay. And I literally had this conversation last night with Angel. And, as I said to her, I don't care what the situation and circumstance is. If there's a breakdown between a parent and a child,
Right.
the parent has to own responsibility of it.
100%.
So either, even if the child is trifling as an adult, then where was the breakdown before we got there?
Before we got to the trifling.
Because I raised this kid a certain kind of way, but again, culture, the great unseen, the great unsaid, and then when they react out of a culture in ways that you don't think, it can create different circumstances. And I always tell people, Frankenstein wasn't the monster.
No.
Frankenstein was the doctor.
Exactly.
If you read the book or watch the movie, they always refer to the monster as the Frankenstein monster. Now, when your child is out there acting like a monster, don't call
That's
the
your
child
Frankenstein. That's your Frankenstein.
That's not your Frankenstein. That's your monster.
That's your Frankenstein monster right there, because you're Frankenstein. I think a lot of people overlook that. I'm glad you made that point, because I was a kid of divorce, and my mom got remarried. And the one thing I will say that they got right is, even though they didn't work out well, I was in the same house I was in from the time I was 1 until I left to go to college. They swapped in and out of the house, but the kids didn't. You know what I mean? And so it's like whoever had the kids, they got the house kind of situation. And I was grateful for that. But I will say my parenting, and I'm going to tell you folks, there's pros and cons to this type of parenting. There's pros and cons. So, my son plays sports. And I recall the nurse calling me from UAD Jesuit High School, a private school. They call me Miss Edwards. My son is named after my dad. The man who raised me, his name is Willie Edwards. and I named my son after him because I felt like he did such a great job with me. That's the biggest compliment I could give him, was to name my son after him. So that's the reason why Julian doesn't have my last name. So they called me from school, Mrs. Edwards, we think your son's hand is broken. I said, okay, can you put him on the phone? I said, Julian, he says, yes, mom. I said, do you still have that math test next class? He said, yeah. I said, okay. I said, hand the phone back to the nurse. I said, do you have some ibuprofen or some Advil or something? She said, yes. I said, okay, can you give it to him? And I hand him back the phone. I said, midget. He said, Mom, I know, I'm not bleeding. I said, are you in a lot of pain? He said, I am. I said, okay, tell her to wrap your hand and I'll be there to pick you up by next class period. I said, but you're going to take this test because the hand that's broken is not even the hand that you write with. My son was as calm as he could be. We went and got that hand in the cast, and Dr. Sosa, to this day, he was like, I've never met a parent like you. But I was such a calm person. I wasn't a person who got all sporadic. And I remember he was playing football on the field, and these two big guys knocked him out, just knocked my child out. I was like, what is happening? All the coaches and the players looked up at me sitting in the seats, and I didn't move. And when they see that I didn't move, they was like, okay. They said, Julian, get up. Julian looked at me, and I was like, them boys came after again and knocked the wind out of him, knocked him at least 2 or 3 feet off the ground. And he hit the ground. That's when I jumped right onto that field, and I ran over to him and I said, what do you think I'm about to say? He said, get up and knock them out. I said, knock their asses out. And when you finish, you can go to the hospital because I know you got a concussion. But I was calm. I stayed calm. Not really. Now, the truth is, inside, I was devastated. I was like, oh my God. Right? But to this day, my son is so calm and so mellow. Anything happens, he's just, boom. He thinks, how do I solve this situation instead of getting all sporadic about it? But at the same time, he said to me the other day, Gaylon, we were leaving church. He says, Mom, I just want to say that I love you, but you raised me where I don't think I need to ask people for help. I said, well, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. He said, you were just so efficient. You never asked anybody to help you with me. You just did everything. So I don't know how to accept help when people give it to me. And I said, you're right. I didn't even think. I thought I was showing him what it's like to be a man and to be responsible, because I made a conscious decision to have this child without a father. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I was mimicking responsibility, thinking, oh, this is good. No, that's what I'm saying, folks. There's pros and cons to this. Now, the good thing is he noticed at 20, he's almost 21, that he's not good. But guess what happened? All the men in the church have been reaching out to him. Julian's now reaching out. Because I said to him, well, why don't you talk to them and figure out how they can help support you?
Yeah.
So he can relearn it. It's not too late to relearn something.
Yeah. I think the challenge comes into play is balancing responsibility and calmness with, I don't have a word for this, so let me just.
You gonna make up one?
Phrase it. I think having a spiritual baseline that I mentioned earlier, mm-hmm. and the culture is necessary. Yeah. But within that culture, I'm a big believer, maybe because I was the benefactor of it, that somebody makes a big deal about you.
Yes.
Okay. For me, that person was my maternal grandmother. She made a big deal about me. Now, it was pros and cons to being the big deal, but
because you were the number one.
Without a doubt, the sunshine of her life, without a doubt. And I don't even, but here's the thing. What that did for my self-esteem, which mattered, because I knew that it was enough grace that even when she was mad, even when she was frustrated and even punitive,
right,
she couldn't stay that way because I was the apple of her eye.
Exactly.
So for me, when I talk about my, while I was raising my child had to understand, I'm a tough dad. And I say tough, not meaning I'm hard. I speak very directly,
right.
But at the same time, she knows that I'm the softness. I'm the,
because she's your number one.
Right. She's going, she gets more out of me than
anybody.
I'm willing to admit, probably anybody. that being said, she knows my
Mhm.
firm no is my firm no.
Yes.
You know, she knows that I'm, you know, that if I give a yes, sometimes it's going to come with with a lesson that goes along with it.
Mhm.
But she knows that I'm going to be a person that's going to make a big deal of being Angel's dad. And
Yes.
because I learned from my grandmother, and I'm not saying my mom and dad and the siblings didn't
Oh
do
yeah,
this,
but everybody has a
or even
person
my
or
other
one.
grandparents, but her
Right.
in particular,
Right.
she made such a big deal to create an environment, a culture that
Mhm.
just said he is special. He is special does not mean he gets away with nonsense.
Yes.
He is special does not mean
Mhm.
he's not supposed to get the grades he's supposed to get, or any of that type of stuff, or morality.
Right.
She would call me to the carpet. Trust me. And even then, after she called me for the carpet, it was a fresh banana pudding in the refrigerator.
Exactly.
So she was tough, but she
Right.
also had compassion. And I think that we have to balance toughness, because sometimes I think
Yes.
tough love, in my opinion, sometimes with parents, they go, I'm not saying that, I'm sure all of us have been guilty of this at times.
Oh
But
yeah.
sometimes tough love can be so strong
Yes.
that we don't give our children opportunities to learn how to be vulnerable. So as your
Yes.
son was saying, I don't know how to do this, is because probably you don't like to be vulnerable.
I don't.
So what ends up happening is, so I grew up with once my life kind of settled, I ended up developing a pack of friends, and we're all
Okay.
friends to this day. So when my daughter was born, I would always bring her around my friends. Matter of fact, one of them, we were doing a hospital visit. One of my friends is in the hospital right now, and we were talking about how Angel used to climb on his shoulders and head and whatever, and they running around. It was just one of those things, but I was doing it for a different reason.
Mhm.
For me, I was trying to show her how real friends behave and act with each other. It was
Oh.
very intentional. It
Right.
wasn't like, oh, I got my kid with me while we hanging out. No.
Right.
It was, what do friends look like?
Kind of that relationship.
So she calls all of my best friends uncle, all of them,
Oh.
because she grew up
Right.
around them.
Taking care of baby girl.
Okay. Again, I'm not saying that everybody has to be as intentional as me, and I'm not saying that means Angel's going to be the
Right.
president of the United States. It just
And
means
the president of the United States.
that I was intentional about the things I wanted her to see. And for me, at least, as a person who's had the benefit of having some of my best friends since
Mhm.
I was a child in early elementary school, that she saw how that was modeled. So she would know the difference
She would know the
between a
difference.
real friend
Right.
and an associate.
That's an excellent example, because friendships now for our children are vital, and especially with our kids, because they're the only one. When you
Yeah,
have an only child, friendships become family
right.
in a lot of instances. And it's so funny you say that, because that's one of the things that Julian compliments me on. Like, my best friend from college is Cook. Even though we went to two different colleges, Cook is that's my now to this day. Cook and I are still we talk 5 times a day.
Yeah.
She in Georgia and I'm here, but we talk 5 times a day. Her son and her come up here and visit me. I go down there and visit them. And that's the thing. And so Julian understands the importance of friendships and acquaintances. Because he said to me the other day, he was talking about one of his friends, and he said, yeah, mom, after they got a DUI, I don't drink. So I just had to cut back on that. And I said, oh, well, you all been friends since high school. He said, yeah. He said, mom, but he got caught up in that. I don't do that. So, I'm still cool with him, but not like before. Well, in Julian's mind was, if you getting caught up in these DUIs, you could be driving and I could be with you.
Mhm.
So a real friend wouldn't hurt a friend. Like, you would stop doing what you're doing. And I said to him, that was, so to me, him being 20 and making that decision, I said, well, okay, you did good. Now, mind you, I was still upset about the fact that he didn't think he could ask for help. That's just me. I'm basically critiquing my parenting
Yeah,
as
well,
on
here's
the
the thing.
side.
Here's the thing. And let me get this out of the way, because I think
Yeah.
this is important. You're going to mess up as a parent.
Yeah, you are.
You're going to make mistakes. They're going to blame you even when you didn't make a mistake.
Honey, when you didn't.
Okay. For something that they have made a conscious choice to do, it will end up being a situation where It's mama's fault, it's daddy's fault, it's somebody else, because the human being projects on other people. That is a function of the ego. All right. So I'm not talking about perfection, as I often say to the staff at Christ Universal Temple when I'm talking to, at my staff meetings. Excellence is the goal, not perfection. If we're consistently excellent, everything else will take care of itself. As a parent, seek excellence. But if you can't be excellent, be really good. If you can't be really good, be good. But try. Okay? Try. That's all I'm saying. Try to be intentional about what you want to see modeled. Okay? If you see behavior that you don't like, check it. Right. Check it. Stop it. Nip it in the bud early. When Angel was a little kid and I would walk in the room, she would hide behind my legs and people would be speaking to her and she wouldn't talk. I would address it immediately. Don't you see these people talking to you? Immediately. I wasn't going to let, because I'm shy, because when we walk into a room, you don't walk into a room and there's 5 or 6 people speaking to you and you just walk past them because you're shy. No.
What?
Okay, that's not how you do things. You want something, learn how to use your voice. Speak up. If you want something, you make the call. I do this to this day. Daddy, could you? No, you make that call. Daddy jumps in when there's something you can't handle.
Right. That's hello. That's what I say to midget. I step in when you can handle it.
So, and sometimes you don't know if you can handle it until you do it.
It's until you do it.
All right. So, so again, and I know, we've covered so much material in this subject today, and I normally don't get into a lot of personal examples, but I think it's important for people to understand. And I'm not talking about something I didn't do.
Right.
And the reasons why I have the positions that I have is because I didn't have that stability that I felt as though I needed at a certain stage in my life until I permanently had some stability. This is where we're going to live, and this is going to be your home, and this is going to be your school, and you're going to be able to see your friends every day, and all of that type of stuff. Until that happened, I didn't exhale. But nobody would have known that as a child.
And I think, like you said, it's tough sometimes for me to be vulnerable and to ask people for help. But one thing, because my parents my mom did a really great job, and my dad did a really great job, that this is the house that Julian has lived in from the time that he was 2 years old, because we moved here when he was 1. And it took me a year to find a house. But from the time that he was 2 until he graduated until now, this has been the house. In this summer, he will own this house. So the house that he grew up in is the house that he will be getting. So to me, that meant a lot, because that's what my parents mimicked for me. And so, folks, I just want to say that, if there were some things missing when you were growing up, it was some stuff missing, because you looked at your friend's life, you looked at some other stuff. And all we're saying is this: even if you're not spiritual, even if you're not religious, just start doing corrective behavior now in this moment. What it is that and if you don't know how, then it's plenty of information online. That's where you got to seek out the best. And y'all know Gaylon gonna give y'all homework, okay? So we're gonna go to a quick commercial break, and then y'all know when we come back, Christina's gonna be gone though. So I'm just gonna say, Gaylon, as always, I'm gonna rewatch this. People laugh when I say this. Even though I'm on the show, I rewatch the show because I got to take notes about what things that I need to do, right? And Gaylon, at some point, I'm just going to give you a Wednesday off, because I really want to play I Meet No One But Me. I think we need to replay that. So y'all might be like, well, this is from another season. Yes, you are correct. It's from another season, but we playing it this season because you've referenced it so many times. And I think every conversation you've had, it kind of pulls from that. Mm-hmm. And that's what people don't understand. All of these things are pulling from that. And it's I Meet No One But Me. And you let me know what Wednesday you want to replay it, but we need to replay that one. That's like a powerful message.
To me, it's the fundamental purpose of this show.
So I felt the same thing too. And we never even talked about this. Yeah. I feel like, yes. So, okay, I'm sorry. So, folks, we're going to quick commercial break. When we get back, Gaylon will be here on his own, and he's going to go through a few more things with you, and he's going to reference some materials and all that kind of stuff. But, Gaylon, thank you so much for being on the 5Fs to Love podcast network. I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate your messaging, because we need it, and we need to understand what we need to do to work on ourselves. Folks, of course, I'll see you next Wednesday. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break.
I'm going out my mind. Give me some directions to get to you. To get to you, ain't gonna waste my time. I know that we got connection. I think about you. You're on my mind. On my mind. On my mind. Yeah, I'm going out of my mind. Out of my mind. Out of my mind. Yeah. For you, my love. You drive me crazy, tell me what to do, what to do. I'm on my knees, yeah, I am begging you, begging you. I'll break the rules if it will get me to, yeah.
All right, so I just have a couple of things that I want to share. Before I get into the homework statements, I do want to leave you with a story. When my daughter was still in her mother's womb, with my ex-wife and I, when we were still together, we bumped into the hallway with a minister, Reverend Herbert Lassiter, who actually this past year made his transition. And he said to me, Gaylon, just as much as your child came here to learn from the two of you, your child was also born for you to learn from her, because we knew it was a girl at that point. And that statement has always stuck with me, because I think it's important for us to understand, what are you here to learn from your child or children? It's not a one-way street. You learn a lot about yourself, and you learn a lot about life through parenting. You learn a lot about your spiritual development and growth through parenting, because relationships are one of the primary ways in which we grow spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. So just don't think that this is a one-way street. Your child, if you will allow it and are open to it, will teach you a lot about love, about compassion, about understanding, about grace, about focus, about intention, and many other things. So just be open and receptive to, what am I supposed to be learning in this experience? Because I meet no one but me. Now, homework. I have a few steps. One is, read the Daily Inspiration for Better Living, or the Daily Word, or some type of periodical like that every day with your child. These are bi-monthly periodicals. Daily Inspiration for Better Living, you can get from ufbo.org. The Daily Word you can get from unity.org. I know Science of Mind magazine also is available. I like that one as well. But these are things that you can read. You say, well, my child doesn't understand this. Just read it. Do the affirmation at the end if it's a scripture. If it's some things you can have them repeat, then do it. But this is just a technique, so they get used to it. All right. To this day, my 33-year-old young baby brother will say, hey, man, I need a daily inspiration, because he was raised with it. All right. Because he was with me so much as a child. Number 2, Teach Your Children to Pray for Protection by James Dillet Freeman. I use the abridged version. There's 2 versions of it. There's the original, and then there's the abridged. Again, pray daily. Before you leave the house, before you leave the garage, as I said earlier, or get in your car, make it a habit that they are praying for protection for themselves and for others. Teach this to them, so that it's so ingrained in their minds. And again, whether they're doing it for themselves, like the light of God surrounds me, the love of God enfolds me, the power of God protects me, the presence of God watches over me, wherever I am, God is, or the group version, the light of God surrounds us, the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. That is a great way to establish a consciousness of spirituality, because it's putting the focus on God, and God is bigger than the experiences and circumstances. All right. Number three, if you go to a religious institution that has a children's ministry, sign your child up, unless you feel as though it's not going to be beneficial. Most children's ministries, even in hardcore places, tend to focus on getting along, love, compassion, loving God and loving others. I'm not here to tell people why they should believe their religion or not. That's not my purpose. It was important for me that my daughter was in the children's ministry, and it was certain lessons that she learned. And I would add to this: teach your child the in the context of this the reason why you serve. My daughter, probably by the time she was 8, was volunteering in the church bookstore. She would bag the books and the items and give them to the people. She would work with some of the older women that were cashiers, especially this lady named Dolores, and she would bag for her and give it, and she loved to do it, because one of the things that I was trying to help her understand is that giving matters, showing up as service matters. Number 3, I recommend a few books. Here are just 2. The Simple Truth by Mary Alice and Richard Jaffola. I love that book. The one that got all the colors, because I saw it's 2 versions of it. The one, the Unity, I believe, still on unity.org, they still sell, and it has a lot of colors. It was basically the principles that are taught in New Thought, specifically the Unity movement, written for children, and I love it. I love it. I can't speak highly enough of the book. The other one would be The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens by Sean Covey. As you're dealing with teenage issues, I think this is a good book to just deal with the psychology of it. Now, here's the thing. Just don't have them read it. You read it first. Okay? And then you can have discussions. What did you learn from this chapter? Have them read it chapter by chapter, not the whole book. You read a chapter. Tell me what you learned. Give me 2 or 3 points that you learned from this chapter. Why? Because you want them to learn how to critically think about what they read and how it can be applied in everyday life. Because if not, it's just good information. It's not transformational. Also, I recommend books that teach children about money. Okay? I think that's important. Because children go into adulthood, they don't know anything about money. That's why I did the Rich Dad, Poor Dad with my daughter. I had her watching Dave Ramsey videos about budgeting and staying away from bad debt, things like that. Why is that important? Because kids are leaving school now with over $100,000, $150,000, some $200,000 in student loan debt, and they don't know how to deal with it, or snowball debt and pay things down, or how to avoid not living your life on credit cards. If they don't understand money, they're going to learn the hard way. And here's the thing, because culture is the great unsaid and the great unseen, that means how you deal with money will greatly affect how your children deal with money. So be mindful, because they'll either see your poor use of it and pick it up, or they'll see your poor use of it and potentially try to use other methods, sometimes not legal, to get it, because they don't want to accept poverty mindsets. They just don't know the legal, good, right way to do it. So those are just some examples of how you can work with spiritual parenting. But I want to just leave you with 2 points. 1, don't beat yourself up for past mistakes. Don't beat yourself up. Give yourself some grace. And then get to work on creating the better version of you that can create the culture, that can create the environment, that can allow your child to know that they're loved and supported, and there's some accountability in a relationship. And what I mean by that is, yes, I love you unconditionally, but that don't mean you get to show up any kind of way you want to show up, and it won't be addressed, even if you don't agree with it. And I don't mean and let me be clear about that, because that can come up shaky. In other words, if you're seeing people that are, your children violating integrity, honesty, morality, ethics, then it's okay to have that conversation. It's okay. And let me also be clear, I'm not talking about some of the stuff that people get caught up with society and, people seeking their own self-expression. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about specifically showing up as a spiritually productive and authentic citizen in the world. You've been given the gift by God to help develop a soul. Don't take it lightly. God bless.